May God bless your day and your week ahead, because we have a really fascinating deep dive for you today. Just imagine standing at the edge of a desert you've just spent 40 grueling years wandering through.
Right, just totally exhausted.
Exactly. You are part of an expedition of like roughly 2 million people. You're completely drained, your sandals are worn thin, and you are just staring across a river at this fortified land you have to conquer.
It's a terrifying prospect.
It really is. And what is the very last thing you write down before you cross that river? You don't write a pep talk. You write a receipt.
Yeah, a highly detailed receipt.
Today, we are exploring Numbers chapter 33. We're drawing on the incredibly detailed notes from the Holman and NAA study Bibles. And at first glance, this chapter, it looks like a massive repetitive list of hard-to-pronounce ancient locations.
Oh, absolutely. It reads like a phone book of the ancient Near East.
Right. But if you look closer, this text is actually a high-stakes historical document. It is dripping with drama, survival, and a rather intense look at human nature.
It really serves as this massive narrative bridge for the people standing on the edge of that new frontier. I mean, this list forces them to look backward at a grueling 4-decade survival story through just an unforgiving desert landscape.
But it doesn't just stay in the past.
No, exactly. The moment it finishes that reflection, it immediately pivots. It looks forward to the promised land, but it does so with a strict, frankly, terrifying warning about the future.
So our goal today is to help you see why this specific itinerary was recorded in this exact way, right?
Yeah.
And what it meant for the survival of an entire nation.
Yeah, and to understand the weight of this list, we really have to look at how it starts.
Right. The study notes point out a striking detail right out of the gate here. This is the only part of the entire book of Numbers expressly stated to be written down by Moses himself.
And he did it at the direct command of the Lord.
Yeah, so this isn't, oral tradition passed down around a campfire for centuries and pieced together by a later historian.
Exactly. That detail changes everything about how you read it. This is the leader of the expedition, acting as a scribe under divine orders, keeping a definitive, real-time log.
It gives the text the weight of a legal document.
It really does.
And the opening scene of this log is incredibly cinematic. It records that they started their journey from Ramesses on the 15th day of the first month.
Which, for context, is the exact day after the first Passover.
Right. So the Israelites are departing boldly. Some translations describe it as marching out with a high hand.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And they are doing this while the Egyptians are actively burying their firstborn sons. The text specifically notes that the Egyptians were reeling from the judgments that had just been executed on their gods.
That image establishes the theological baseline for the entire 40-year journey.
How so?
Well, the Israelites aren't sneaking out the back door under the cover of darkness, They are marching out in full view of their former captors.
Captors who are completely paralyzed by grief and defeat.
Exactly. And that detail about the Egyptian gods is crucial for understanding the environment they were leaving.
Yeah.
The plagues of Egypt weren't just random ecological disasters.
Right.
They were systematic dismantlings of the Egyptian pantheon.
Oh, right, because the darkness targeted Ra, the sun god, and the Nile turning to blood targeted Hapi, the god of the river.
Precisely. I mean, the Egyptian gods who were supposed to protect the nation, ensure the harvest, and guard the pharaoh's firstborn have been entirely humiliated.
So the departure log is essentially listing the fallen idols of the greatest superpower on earth.
Yes, the God of Israel is demonstrating supreme, unmatched sovereignty right out of the gate.
But then, after this dramatic opening, the text settles into a highly repetitive literary pattern. It's almost hypnotic to read.
It really is.
It goes, they departed from X and camped at Y. They departed from Y and camped at Z. Over and over, 42 distinct stops.
Right.
It reads like an ancient GPS log or like a meticulous fitness tracker recording a marathon route.
It does. But the NAA study notes offer a much more fascinating historical parallel for this structure.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the parallel is brilliant when you see it. This specific style of itinerary, that relentless departed from, camped at structure, was actually a highly recognizable literary genre in the ancient Near East.
Wait, really? Like, who else used it?
Specifically, it mirrors the military campaign logs of the great Egyptian pharaohs.
Okay.
We're talking about rulers like Thutmose III, Amenhotep II, and Seti II.
So this was the mass media of the ancient world.
Oh, it's pure state propaganda.
Yeah.
When a pharaoh went on a massive conquest campaign, His scribes would record the army's movements in this exact repetitive format.
I
They
see.
would then carve these logs into the massive stone walls of temples, like the Karnak temple complex, for everyone to see.
Wow.
The repetitive rhythm was designed to project absolute power, perfect order, and unstoppable momentum.
Yeah.
It was a way of saying, we marched here, we conquered. We marched there, we conquered.
Okay, but wait, if Moses is mirroring the victory logs of these pharaohs, the analogy kind of breaks down for me.
How so?
Well, a pharaoh only carved his highlight reel into the temple walls. They literally chiseled over their defeats.
Sure.
If I run a marathon and sprain my ankle at mile 3, I'm deleting that activity from my fitness app. I am not broadcasting my failure.
Right, right.
So why does Moses use a triumphant military format but include the miserable failures? Because this list includes places of intense suffering, rebellion, and national disgrace.
That is the genius of it.
Yeah.
By adopting the literary form of an Egyptian pharaoh's victory log, Moses is entirely subverting the genre.
Subverting it.
Yeah. The victor in this log isn't the human leader, and it certainly isn't the Israelite army. As you mentioned, they failed, they complained, they want to go back to Egypt.
Right.
The victor in this campaign is God.
Oh, wow. So it's like an anti-propaganda log.
Exactly. The inclusion of those low points proves that this is an honest historical receipt. It's a testimony of unmerited grace.
That makes so much sense.
It effectively says, look at all the places we rebelled. Look at how close we came to destroying ourselves. And look at how this unseen God marched us through the wilderness anyway.
But, you know, recognizing God as the victor is easy in the abstract. It gets a lot harder when you actually look at the brutal realities of the stocks on this list.
Oh, absolutely.
You go from absolute luxury to absolute terror in the span of a few verses. For instance, the list mentions that they camped at Elim.
Elim.
And Elim was essentially an oasis resort in the middle of nowhere. It had 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees.
Which is incredible.
Right. For nomadic people in a scorching desert, 70 palm trees means shade, it means life, it means relief.
Yeah.
But right alongside it, they camp at Rephidim, where the text bluntly states there was no water for the people to drink, just dust and panic.
The contrast is staggering, and it highlights the psychological toll of a 40-year nomadic journey. You never know if the next stop is going to be an oasis or a dry riverbed.
Exactly.
What the Holman notes point out is that this journey was anything but a straight line from point A to point B. Out of the 42 stops listed in this chapter, 17 of these locations do not appear anywhere else in Scripture.
17. They are completely unique to this one chapter.
Yes, they are the minutiae of survival. If you were just trying to tell a sweeping, heroic myth, you wouldn't bother listing 17 obscure campsites where nothing major happened.
Right.
You include them because this is a literal accounting of where 1 million+ people pitched their tents to survive the night.
And alongside those obscure campsites, you have moments of shocking precision, like the death of Aaron, Moses' brother, and the high priest of the nation. The text doesn't just casually mention that he died along the way. It gives us a hyper-specific timestamp.
It really does.
It says he died on Mount Hor in the 40th year after leaving Egypt, in the 5th month, on the first day of the month, at the exact age of 123.
That timestamp anchors the emotional weight of the entire narrative in harsh historical reality.
Yeah.
An entire generation has died in this wilderness because of their earlier rebellion at the edge of Canaan.
Yeah.
The death of Aaron, the high priest himself, is the culmination of that generational passing.
It signals that the 40 years of wandering are officially coming to an end.
Exactly.
But this is what absolutely blew my mind when reading the Holman notes. Despite that hyper-specific chronological timestamp for Aaron's death, the exact geographic locations of almost all of these stops are completely unknown to modern geography.
Yeah, it's wild.
We have the dates, but we literally don't know where the places are.
The vast majority of this itinerary has simply been swallowed by the sands of history.
Even Mount Sinai.
Yes.
Which is arguably the most important site in their entire national history. This is where the sky turned black, the mountain shook, and they received the law. And the study notes mention there are over 20 proposed sites for Mount Sinai today. Some scholars point to Jebel Musa in the traditional southern Sinai Peninsula. Others suggest Jebel Hilal further north, or even mountains across the Gulf in Saudi Arabia. Nobody can agree on it.
No one knows for sure.
But doesn't losing the exact geographic location of Mount Sinai somehow weaken the impact of this historical receipt?
I can see why you'd think that.
Because if this is a legal document proving they were there, and we can't find the main locations on a map today, doesn't that undermine the whole thing for later generations?
Well, it's a very modern instinct to want GPS coordinates. We want to know the exact latitude and longitude so we can go build a monument, set up a plaque, and build a tourist visitor center.
Oh, totally. We love a good gift shop.
Right. But the theological takeaway here is profound. The geographical uncertainty doesn't matter, and it is highly likely that it's intentional.
Intentional, because God didn't want them to find it again.
Think about human nature. If they knew exactly where Mount Sinai was, they would have turned the mountain itself into an idol. They would have worshipped the dirt and the rocks, because that's where the divine touched down. By allowing the map to fade into obscurity, God ensures that the focus remains entirely on the providence, not the place.
That is fascinating.
A list wasn't preserved to give you a treasure map of the ancient Middle East. It was preserved to prove God's sovereign care. It is a documented receipt showing how a massive population was miraculously fed with manna, hydrated from rocks, and preserved in a harsh, deadly environment.
So the survival itself is the miracle.
Exactly, regardless of which specific sand dune they were standing on when it happened.
The survival itself is the receipt. The people are the living proof of the journey.
Yes.
So they've survived for 40 years. They've left this winding trail of obscured oases and dry riverbeds behind them. And finally, the itinerary suddenly halts.
Right.
They arrive at the plains of Moab right by the Jordan River, and the narrative tone of Numbers 33 shifts instantly.
It's an abrupt stop. The reflection on the past ends, and the stark reality of the present hits them.
The text notes that the Canaanite king of Arad hears that the Israelites are coming. That is the signal. The wandering is over, the conquest is about to begin, and God gives Moses absolute, uncompromising instructions for entering Canaan.
Very strict instructions.
They are commanded to drive out all the inhabitants of the land. They are told to destroy all the carved figures, to destroy all the cast metal images, and to demolish all the high places. The Hebrew word used there is Bamoth.
The destruction of the Bamoth is a crucial detail. These high places weren't just scenic hills.
Right.
They were localized centers of cultic worship. In the ancient worldview, deities were tied to specific regions and territories.
I see.
You worshiped them on elevated platforms because elevation meant you were getting closer to the heavens, closer to the gods of the sun and storm.
Wow.
By ordering the destruction of the Bamoth, the cast images, and the idols, God is demanding a complete spiritual reset of the land.
A total cleanse.
Yes. This isn't just about claiming real estate. It's about eradicating a deeply entrenched, abusive religious system that involved things like child sacrifice.
And once that complete reset happens, the logistics of settling the land come into play.
Right.
The text specifies that the land is to be divided by lot according to family size. The larger tribes get a larger inheritance, the smaller tribes get a smaller one.
Which is incredibly complicated.
Yeah, how do you divide an entire country fairly among 2 million people who have only known nomadic survival?
It's a massive transition from a survival economy to an agrarian one. The casting of lots was essential because it removed human bias from the equation.
That makes sense.
If human leaders just pointed at a map and handed out the lush valleys to their friends and the rocky hills to their rivals, you would have an immediate civil war.
Oh, absolutely.
Casting lots meant that distribution was left to divine providence, but it was balanced by the practical logic of population size.
But right after these practical logistics, we get to the end of the chapter, and the tone shifts one last time into a chilling warning.
It is a severe conditional judgment. The entire promise of the land hinges on these final verses.
Yeah.
God tells Israel that if they fail to drive out the inhabitants, if they compromise and leave some behind, those survivors will become barbs in your eyes and thorns in your sides.
That is quite the image.
They will bring constant, agonizing trouble to the land they live in.
It sounds less like a diet where you cheat with a little junk food and more like trying to eradicate black mold from a house's foundation.
That's a great way to put it.
Because if you demolish the walls but leave a few spores in the floorboards because it was just too hard to rip them up, you haven't actually fixed the problem. The mold eventually takes over the whole house again. It's a complete systemic contamination.
That is a much more accurate way to understand the stakes.
Yeah.
The study notes emphasize that this is a warning against religious syncretism.
Syncretism.
Yeah, syncretism is what happens when you blend different religious beliefs and practices together. If Israel left the Canaanite religious structures intact, if they left the mold in the floorboards, They wouldn't just politely coexist.
They'd mix them.
Exactly. They would inevitably start blending the worship of Yahweh with the worship of local fertility gods, just to ensure their crops would grow.
Hmm.
They would adopt the very practices God was actively judging the Canaanites for.
Which leads to the final unsettling threat at the very end of the chapter. God says, if Israel disobeys and falls into this idolatry, I will do to you what I plan to do to them.
It's intense.
Let me ask you, is this final threat just motivational fear? Like a coach yelling at a team in the locker room to keep them focused on the game plan? Or is this a literal binding legal clause that completely reframes their supposedly promised inheritance?
It is absolutely a binding legal clause, and if you read the rest of the Old Testament, you see it play out tragically.
Wow.
This is where the historical receipt of the past meets the legal contract of the future. The land is promised to Abraham's descendants, yes, but their immediate tenure and peace within that land is highly conditional.
I see.
If Israel begins to act like the Canaanites, God declares he will treat Israel exactly like the Canaanites. He will evict them from the land.
That's a huge shift.
It proves that God's justice is entirely impartial. He doesn't just play favorites based on ethnicity or historical lineage. His baseline requirement for living in the land is holiness.
If you act like them, I will treat you like them. That completely shatters the modern assumption of what it means to be the chosen people.
It really does.
It wasn't a VIP pass to do whatever they wanted. It was a massive, crushing responsibility. It means the 40 years of wandering they just read about in that repetitive log wasn't just a punishment for their past mistakes. It was a grueling training camp for the holiness that would be required in their future.
Precisely. And that's exactly why Moses was commanded to write it all down.
Yeah.
They needed to see the full data set of their own history staring back at them.
Yeah.
They needed to see the moments God saved them at the oasis of Elim, the moments they panicked on the dust of Rephidim, and the sheer volume of grace it took to get them to the plains of Moab. Because the challenge ahead of them, remaining holy and uncompromising in a culture of deep idolatry, was actually going to be harder than surviving the desert.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to mull over today as you go about your week.
Right.
We've been looking at the ancient itinerary of an entire nation. But what if you had to write down the Numbers 33 of your own life?
That's a heavy question.
What if you had to sit down and write a brutally honest chronological list of every spiritual or personal milestone you've experienced? Not just the highlight reel you show on social media, not just the victories.
But the failures, too.
Exactly. A list that included the obscure campsites, the oases where you felt incredibly provided for, right alongside the deserts where you felt completely deprived, lost, or where you entirely failed.
It forces you to look at the whole picture, not just the pieces you want to remember.
Exactly. If you saw that pattern on paper, if you saw the undeniable thread of how you survived all of it, how you were carried through the dry seasons and the failures to get to the exact riverbank you're standing on right now, how would seeing that historical receipt change the way you face the very next challenge in front of you?
Wow.
Would it give you the courage to root out the compromises in your life?
It's a profound exercise in recognizing providence.
Oh.
When you realize the survival itself is the miracle, it changes how you view the future.
It really does. Well, that is all the time we have for today's deep dive into the desert logs and final warnings of Numbers chapter 33.
Such a rich text.
Thank you so much for exploring this ancient, incredibly relevant history with us. Remember to keep looking at your own journey with fresh eyes and recognize the grace in every single stalk along the way. We are signing off for now, and remember, God blesses all the listeners. Take care.